Hi everyone, Danny from the CBAA here. That's me on the video there in a second. Coming to you live from my attic, Harry Potter style. Here to present today's webinar to you, Fundraising as a Positive Message. Thank you so much to everyone for your patience with the earlier problem there that we had with the webinar. Great to see that we're all back and working at the moment. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which we're broadcasting our webinar, the Wongal people of the Darug Nation. We pay respects to elders past and present, and of course we extend this respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders nationwide, acknowledging their connection to our land, waters and community. Our presenter for today's session is Justin Kendall, Community Relations Manager for Hope Media Limited. He's here with us online. We were looking at doing a short and sharp webinar today. I've sort of somewhat torpedoed that already by not having it work, but Justin, I'll give you both the screen and let you know that the floor is yours. You can hopefully should be able to grab the screen at the moment. I'll wait for that to flash up and then I will let you do your thing. There it is. Thanks so much for your patience, everyone. Very much appreciated. Justin Kendall from Hope Media, take it away.
Good morning. Thanks, Danny. And what a relief to know that it wasn't me that broke it. The adrenaline rush of thinking that that in my first seconds of the webinar I had destroyed it for everybody. So very relieved that wasn't my fault. Look, thanks for taking time out of your day to run through this webinar. And you know, I think as much as we are all very tired of screen time, there is much to be gained by gathering together as people, as a sector, to try and grow. So thank you to the CBAA and the CMTO for letting me be a part of this morning. So look, I am presenting on I guess the theme, which is fundraising as a positive message. But I just want to straight off the bat say, I don't think the term fundraising as a positive message is right. I think fundraising is a positive message. I think it is inherently positive. So let me just move through and please let me know. I'm a shocker at multitasking, but I'm going to do my best here to manage screens. And let's just see how we go here. Almost there. Okay, now I'm assuming you can all see that because I've lost you.
Okay. I can see the fundraising as a positive message page, and you can
Great.
see the cursor moving across it, mate.
All right, excellent. Thanks, mate. So I guess just the rules of engagement. What is positive? A positive isn't a performance style or a strategy. It's a posture, it's an attitude, and it's a decision. It's an expression of hope and of possibility. So it doesn't mean silly or funny or insincere. It's just real and thoughtful and true. That's an expression of honesty and real relationship. And I think making great work possible is positive and it's important. So it really doesn't matter the sound of your station, the size of your station, the age or the history of your station, who your listeners are, who they were or who they should be. It doesn't matter how much or how little you're trying to raise or how easy or hard it is to raise that money. And it doesn't really matter what your own skill or experience is. Funding great work can be, and I think it should be, a really positive experience, both inside and outside the building. So I said to Danny earlier that my brain works in analogies and metaphors, and I have a habit of messing them up beautifully. But I think fundraising is very much like a song. And I'm going to unpack that over the next 20 minutes. And if you've got any questions, obviously, as Danny said, please share them in the chat or in the Facebook chat. And we'll spend some time at the end working through those questions where we have time. But you know, I think underneath every song is a beat. And I think throughout the fundraising cycle or program of fundraising, communication is the beat. So clear, consistent, transparent, timely, accurate, organized communication. Meaningful buy-in with all of the people involved starts with meaningful information. So communicating with staff, volunteers, your supporters, and the broader listener community is so important. Don't assume that they know what you're doing and why you're doing it. So don't hold back. Share the needs and the dreams and the challenges and the wins. Everyone should know what they need to know, and some as a minimum. And I think this beat runs through every aspect of the campaign and really everything we do in our work. And any great song relies on some power chords, and I've got 3 power chords that I think are essential for an effective and positive fundraising campaign. Firstly, preparation is so important. At Hope, we work on a 90-day production schedule. So we start thinking about an appeal 90 days before the appeal kicks off. So we start working on themes, messaging, artwork, production, the channel integration, training and logistics, and any other engagement that's helpful. So if you're working with consultants, make sure that you start the conversation with them. Little things like catering, get that sorted early. So it's not, I'm not assuming you all have catering for your appeals. That's a luxury, but it can also be a distraction. And get your board's buy-in. Start that conversation early if there are things that need to go through the board. And then there's preparing rosters, who does what and when. And certainly at Hope, everyone plays a role, everyone. You'll ideally have all of your direct mail and email and all the other channels of communication locked in and rolling out in about a month before the Onair event kicks off. And it doesn't matter how big or small your station is, everything above can be scaled. The third power chord, the second power chord is consistency. If you're using a theme or a brand around your campaign, make it really clear and put the listener at the center of it. Not the target, which is tempting, not you or the station, and be disciplined and intentional with it. You want to build your message and your tone and your language and all of the supporting communications around that. But also know and read and understand your audience. Just because you've seen something work elsewhere doesn't mean it will work for you. So you know your people best. And as I say, the cool stuff isn't always the right stuff. And if you're using many channels, make sure that you're on brand and you're telling the same story across channels. So you want to be familiar and you want to be reliable to your people. And the third thing, which I think is hard to articulate, and sometimes it's something that comes naturally or we have to work hard for it. But you know, funding the work we do is special. It's a special occasion to run an appeal. It's the peak of our partnership with the community, and it's where they give up something of theirs for your cause, for the work you do. Now, so if you're a fundraiser, either by title or you just wear many hats, as many of you do, you're the champion of this relationship with listeners. And you have to lead with an energy and a passion that doesn't always come naturally. And I know for me, it wasn't a natural thing for me to be driving the energy around an appeal and fundraising for our organisation, but it is today. So verse 1, continuing the song analogy, and forgive me if I get a little carried away with it. But verse 1, we're setting things up, we're telling a story, and we're building the momentum. So really, we've just got to sort out some of the basics before we move into the campaign itself. What is the need? Budgets and plans and projects need to be figured out. How much do you actually need to raise? And you want to land this as early as you can and share it internally with the right people. Don't get caught up in numbers with the supporters and your broader audience. Laboring a tally or the target can drown out the story. That is your case for support. It can really get in the way of you talking about why the station matters. The need is a number, but that number stands for something. So try and link the numbers to the impact and the outcomes, and wherever you can, link it to people. Why is it needed is a really important question, and it's amazing how many people within stations or within not-for-profits don't really understand why fundraising is actually something that is essential for the health and growth of the organisation. So what is your value proposition? What does the station provide to your listeners and the broader community? And what impact does raising this money have on the station's ability to deliver? What does it actually mean on the ground? And try and articulate this really clearly and take the time to share it with the team. As a part of that 90-day window, you want to be sharing this information with the team and the volunteers. And where it's appropriate, through imaging and direct mail, share it with your listeners. And I guess the question that you have to probably start with in your own heart is, do you believe your station is worth it? And I think you should be able to articulate that in one sentence. And this is the clincher as we go on air and through other channels with our fundraising. It's, how is the need met? This is where we're linking our listeners with the needs of the station. So what role does the listener play? And unpack the funding model. Don't get bogged down in it, but you want to explain the role of sponsorship and underline the privilege and the responsibility of giving towards something you love. At Hope, we continue to try and work on language that is less about money and donations and much more about gift and investing in something important. So it's more than a transaction, it is a gift. And if a listener doesn't believe that their support will make a difference, go back to basics and get that part right. Get a couple of sentences or phrases together that the listeners can resonate with, so that they know that when they give to your station, it's achieving something and there's a return. They may never see the return, but they believe in you. And ask your supporters, this is a really important part of fueling an on-air campaign, but ask your supporters why they gave. And get into a rhythm of sharing that stuff with the staff and the volunteers and the supporters throughout the year. So, quick recap on verse 1. What's the need? Why is it needed? And how is the need met? And integrate and just reiterate the answers to these questions into all of your communications leading into the on-air event. And ultimately, everything you're saying and doing points to the big three questions above. So the chorus, the main event. This is where we get to invite our community into the party. But it's up to us to lead, and it can get a bit rocky. So I throw that line, hold your nerve, in there really intentionally, and I'll unpack that a little bit later. So in the chorus, there's kind of two things that I think we need to just focus on, and we could spend literally days just talking about what an on-air fundraiser could be. I've spent almost 10 years now at Hope, and every time we run an on-air campaign, there are new things that we bring to the conversation to explore and experiment with. But for the purpose of keeping this on track, I'm just going to list some of the things that I think are important. And if you've got questions about those, or you want me to unpack them later, just let me know. But the two areas are people and process. And in terms of people and how we intersect and relate as a part of an on-air campaign, we have a really simple philosophy at Hope, which is all hands on deck. It's everyone's party and everyone's responsibility. And it doesn't matter how big your station is or how important you are inside your station. Positions, egos, traditions come a distant second. And my CEO, I believe, is a great example of how this plays out. He answers the phones and empties the bins. And, it's both his position as leader, but also as a humble servant to the organisation, and he really believes in it. So a great example there. I'm not going to name my boss, but some of you know him, and he'll be embarrassed by me including this. Treat the on-air appeal like a grand final. Culmination and celebration of everyone's value and hard work. and gather together when that is possible again, eat together, whiteboard together. So much of what happens as part of an on-air campaign is just sharpening things up and working on the fly. Something doesn't work, gather together, talk it through, and where you can, collaborate with ideas and feedback. Invite supporters in, both to the station, but also just into the story. Ask them what they think of what you're doing, and listen to them, listen to their stories. And process is, in some ways, this is the part that is really important to get right, but it's also something that is always evolving, and you need to work within the confines and the opportunities of your own station. But at Hope, we have a really strong commitment as a part of our on-air campaigns, which run between 7 and 10 days, depending on the time of year. But every break, every hour, every day is filled with campaign spots, language, calls to action, the stories and the testimonies of our listeners. We pack the days full with imaging for our appeals. And, the temptation is to think that the audience will switch off. Some will, but those who believe in what you're doing need the opportunity to give. One way to overcome the relentlessness of that messaging is to be consistent with it, be clear with it, but also be creative and, plan it out. You've got time. You've got to find the time, if you don't have the time, to plan out how you're going to speak to your audience about the needs of the station. Use Teams on air wherever possible. And I know that that's a challenge for most stations. It's a challenge for us at Hope. We always struggle, even though we're a large station in a capital city. Getting the right combinations of people is always challenging. We're struggling always just to fill a roster, but it's a really big priority for us to try and get people working together, and it helps everyone. It frees people up to relax a lot more on the air. Live is obviously ideal, but production can be really powerful. So after hours, overnight, weekends, really focus on getting your production elements strong and continuing the narrative, continuing to tell the story and share the needs. And using stories, regardless of the station that you're a part of, there are stories to be told about why the station exists, why the station is important, and the role of the listener and the impact on the listener. So we always want to be pointing back to the listener. We don't want to be org-centric or navel-gazing. We want to hear the stories of people who are a part of our listener community. And at a really practical level, create and use a handbook or a playbook. It doesn't need to be long, but it comes back to those power chords of being prepared, being consistent, and bringing heart. Naturally we drift if we don't have those boundaries in place around language and the I guess the framework of the appeal. Simple things like phone numbers and websites, dollar handles, all the details. But invest the time in getting a guide for all staff and contributors so that we don't make those mistakes. Continuing just with process, don't overcomplicate things. It's tempting to get caught up in all the new technology, new social media platforms. There's just so much to juggle as a part of trying to communicate with everyone all at once. Don't overcomplicate it. Stick to what you do best and get really good at that. And don't panic. Things are going to go wrong. They always do. We had a situation about 20 minutes ago where something went wrong on this call. We just restart the meeting. We just get on with it. Communicate up and down. It's really important that when things aren't going to plan, or when things are really going to plan and there's something to celebrate, it's so important to keep people informed. Keep your boss informed. Keep the volunteers and the team involved in running the appeal informed. And just say thank you a lot. I know it's probably something that comes really naturally to most of you, but it's easy in the intensity of a fundraiser to get so focused on what you're doing that you you don't say thanks enough. So I would just encourage you, as a part of building culture in your building, as a part of sharing gratitude with your listeners, just get into the habit of saying thank you. It's probably an obvious one, but I'll say it anyway. And use every channel you have, but use common sense. Like I said, if your audience isn't on Facebook, don't overdo it on Facebook. Just be where your audience is. And always focus on the impact of the support, not the cost of operation. And I know that this can be hard at times when there are really practical implications of funding. So wherever you can, I'd say avoid language like "you keep the lights on," and continue to work on the language that is "a life is changed," or your corresponding impact for your station. And verse 2 is a short one, but it's kind of, in some ways, it's a really important one. So after the Onair campaign has come to a close, what do we do next? And so much of what feeds into your next Onair campaign is done in verse 2 of this one. So again, say thank you across every channel. Personalize the thank you as much as you can. Use SMS, email, your receipting, all of those things, those tools in the toolkit for donor care. The first thing you need to do after someone has given is thank them. And there's really no excuse for not doing something that affirms the generosity of your listeners. Personally welcome new and returning supporters. This is something that takes a bit of time and investment, and hopefully your database allows you to do this. But if you can welcome people into the family, and people who have been away from the family for a while back into the family, your chance of a second gift and continue in a strong lifetime giving pattern it's exponentially high. Report back on the result and what it means for the future, and go deeper with major supporters. Going deep with major supporters is, in some ways, what can be the difference between a successful and an unsuccessful appeal. Your major supporters will often, they'll take between 30 and 50% of the overall that comes in during an appeal. So it's really important that they understand the value of their gift. Every gift is important, but with majors, you do need to go deeper. And an obvious one, but deliver on the promises that you made during the event. If you said you're buying a transmitter, buy it. If you're launching a new program or initiative, launch it. Make sure that you debrief with your team, even if it's just a small group who are involved on the ground, a mix of volunteers, maybe even a listener. But always debrief with eyes on the future. It's not a chance to say, to be critical. It's a chance to improve, and keep communicating. As I said at the start, that's the beat through it all. Communication, and don't ever assume that everyone knows what they need to know. Always over communicate rather than under, because it's almost time for the next song. So some closing thoughts. And just pushing the analogy just one step too far, but we'll call this the bridge. This stuff takes a bit of courage, like clap number 1 for an applause, or first to stand for a standing ovation. I don't know if you've ever been in either of those situations. I'll always wait, but it's a leap. It can get awkward. It's a vulnerable step, but like I said earlier, this is a good thing that we're doing. So it's a beautifully and unashamedly positive thing to do, to invite positive change in our organisations and invite listeners to be a part of it. And it takes time. So I would encourage you to persevere. And some of you may have been persevering in fundraising roles for a long time without seeing the ship turn. But I'll just say one appeal with a fancy dress day isn't proxy for positive. And, two appeals a year for 3 years, and the narrative can start to shift. From that drama and mystery that many appeals can be, to a thrilling adventure. And that might be a bit idealistic, but I think it's possible. It takes mistakes, and that corny but true ism, fail forward. Some days you won't read the room very well. You'll try to be too clever. You'll miss the mark. And some days you'll just go backwards. You'll offend people. You'll do the wrong thing. You'll try hard and you'll fail big. And sometimes your boss or your board or your team will just say no. At one station I work with, we've averaged about 15% growth every year for about 20 years, a great legacy of generosity there. And at another station I work with, it's about 20% a year. It's growth over the last 5 years. But I cannot begin to tell you how many things didn't work along the way, how many mistakes were made, how many times I have felt like a fool, and how often I've asked my wife how many bullets I can dodge before I'm finally and fatally, quite rightly, hit. But this work isn't life and death stuff, so I would just encourage you to give it a crack. And it takes help. The fact that you're on this webinar tells me that you're open to getting help in areas that you don't have capacity, or you just want to know more about. There are thousands of not-for-profits, hundreds and hundreds of community radio stations around Australia. Don't reinvent the wheel, and don't drown in the anxiety or the unknown of now. And maybe what's not working, but seek out solid, wise, trustworthy people to help you make the fundraising program positive. Advice and help doesn't have to cost a lot, but it is worth a lot. And I'm convinced that the most serious, intense, conservative, messy, dysfunctional, mature cause can be funded using a positive, inclusive, and organised approach to fundraising. And again, there's a little bit of idealism there, but like I said at the start, being positive isn't about being silly or funny. It's really about being authentic and engaging in real relationship. And the fade out, the end of the song. I'll just leave you with this. If you have energy for only one part of the song right now, and that's probably true for many of the people on this call, just land the chorus. That's where your community becomes community. They get to share in something together. So take the risk, invite them on stage, give them the microphone. And I would say that extends to everyone you work with. Open the invitation wide and persevere with the risk that is handing the microphone over. That is it for me, and I'll open up now to, I guess, Danny and some Q&As. Like I said, I haven't been able to multitask. I don't know what questions are coming through. So,
no, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Justin. Justin Kendall there, ladies and gentlemen. I love that last point there that you had there in the fade out. And I do love all of that. The song is metaphor for your presentation today. The point there, your community becomes community when they get to share in something together. And I imagine that sort of ties into everything that you're doing. Sort of when you started off the session, you talked about how important the preparation is. You listed there 90 days for preparation. I imagine you could probably extend that a bit further. I wouldn't be surprised if sort of you're planning your next major fundraiser sort of the next day after the last day of your current fundraiser.
That's right. That's right. I mean, so much of what happens in a debrief or that post-fundraising discussion feeds into what you do for the next one. So while it's fresh, keep that momentum into the next one going. You always learn stuff, whether you're doing a single day fundraiser or at Hope, as I said, we do between 7 and 10 days. So much to learn out of one.
And that consistency of messaging that you referred to there as well, where you want the message for any fundraising you're doing to, I guess, reflect sort of how you are framing your station to your community.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's so tempting when you've got lots of different people involved in a process that the things get a little disjointed. But if you can land a consistent and both from the artwork and language to just the tone, the way you're speaking to your audience, get that consistency. I think it's so important that they can trust you and they know what to expect from you, even when normal programming stops in order to fund normal programming.
And I think it's also important there too, where you're sort of saying that, like the stuff with the you had under the banner of the chorus and all of that stuff, and with building that positive message, you've obviously got to get all of the people, all the volunteers there at the station, keen and on board and believing in the fundraiser and using it. And now it's probably, though, during a pandemic, is probably not the best time to be putting forward that you use your fundraisers and everything as an excuse to have a bit of a social event. But when the situation changes, it's probably a good way to get everyone there together, is sort of a few months out as part of preparation, having everyone there all sitting together, understanding the message from the outset and knowing that sort of them joining together is what's going to make it enjoyable.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we try and create a real social atmosphere around our appeals at Hope. We gather as often as we can. We have lunches, and I did mention catering earlier. And I know that's probably a real luxury, but we have 40 to 50 people in our building at any given time. So you want to be fostering the atmosphere of community and family within the building as much as you can, regardless of the size of the station. So I encourage, wherever possible, bring people together and talk and unpack what's working, what's not working, and why you're doing what you're doing.
Well, catering can also mean people making some sandwiches and having them there for everyone as well. So
That's
not
right.
necessarily something where you've got to get the food, the craft services van around or anything.
Oh,
like
exactly. Yeah.
Lyndon has a question for you, and indeed, put this to everyone there. So if anyone else has got anything they'd like to put forward in the chat, what's been your most successful fundraiser and why? And from that, what worked well and what were the main elements you took away that you can work on? So yeah, what was your most successful fundraiser and why?
I guess I'm happy to, with the microphone now, I'm happy to answer that one first. Look, I would say we had a couple of really successful ones, consecutive fundraisers in a row, and both times it was happening amidst some big stuff happening in our city in Sydney. So we had bushfires one year and then pandemic soon after. They were our strongest appeals in history. But I think it was because we were listening really carefully to what was happening in our city and responding in real time, as much as we could in real time, to the needs of our city. So in the November, where the bushfires were raging, we put our appeal on hold for a day. And we spent that day, we are a Christian community radio station, so we offered to pray for our city and the people affected by bushfires that day. So it was really important for us to put the needs of our city first and take that risk. Not to be heroes, but just to be real with our city. We had people on staff who were, rushing home to possibly put fires out in their backyard. So I think it's just being attentive to what's happening in your community and responding in real time.
And I just started talking then and I realised I was on mute. You said there as part of the presentation that obviously you don't want to frame it in such a way as in you get in touch, donate, because it's part of keeping the lights on and everything. Do you find that to be a delicate balance to sort of be able to convey to your community the importance of them contributing and how it is going to help you keep the lights on, but not sort of saying that?
Yeah, it is. It's constantly a challenge because well, for us, the biggest bills we pay are salaries, and that's not sexy in fundraising. So it's really important for us to talk about what people do, why a building is important, why electricity and bills are important. But I come back to, we've just got to keep looking at the impact that having the lights on has on our city or our community or the people who listen. So it's definitely a tension. You want to be practical, certainly around things like transmitters and keeping the lights on. You can't ignore the fact that that's how radio works. But
Exactly.
if you can always bring it back to what's underneath it, why having the station operating on a strong signal is actually a good thing.
Exactly, and it is, and I guess it's also a way for you to be able to tell your station's story along with all of that as well as putting that in there. Orlin also asks another question: is there an available online source to see what types of fundraisers community stations have hosted in the past? I think probably all you could really do is go back through the archives of what stations are doing. That would probably be a really valuable thing to have on hand there to sort of go through the history of fundraising there in the sector. So, Lyndon, I regret to inform you that there isn't that sort of resource available. That certainly is very much worth looking at there, to have that there to sort of see how fundraising has changed over the years and sort of have records there for people to check out of what have been successful fundraisers for stations in the past. So leave that
I'd
one
just
with
say, sorry, Danny, I would say, feel free to just ask stations. We keep all of our stuff on file. So if there's anything, we've got nothing to hide. If it's worked for us, we hope it works for you, but just ask us and we can share what we have. And any other station that might be like yours, so that it is a bit more apples and apples, just ask them. Most are pretty, I would say, most are pretty happy to share.
And I would say you're absolutely right there. Sort of anything that I don't really believe I've seen an instance where community stations have considered themselves to be in competition with one another, not just for fundraisers, but indeed for all aspects of operations. Justin, thank you so much for taking the time today to take part in this webinar and present that to us. That was an absolutely wonderful presentation. The presentation will be sent out to all registrants for today's session, so you'll be able to check that out. You'll also be able to go back and watch the recording of this session, should you wish to fast forward to the bit there at the end where I put my face on it, or indeed the bit at the start where I was there making excuses for why the webinar crashed in the first instance. Justin, thank you so much for your, not only your patience, but your knowledge and experience that you've that you've shared with our audience here today. I owe you one for that, mate.
Thank you so much for having me, Danny, and everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. Thank you, everyone, for turning up. Thank you to Michaela and everyone there at the Community Media Training Organisation. Stay in touch with us. Future correspondence from the CBAA will let you know about next month's webinar. It's going to be on political engagement, because it would seem that we're all going to have to head to the polls sooner rather than later. And you can find out how your station can be there engaging with politicians in the lead up to the election. Thanks again, everyone, for making this a possibility. I look forward to seeing you all soon. If anyone's having any difficulties with the state of the world at the moment and wondering how best they can get things happening at their station, please do give us a call here at the CBAA, 0293102999. That's 0293102999, or you can email me directly, danny.chifley@cbaa.org.au. Thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. I look forward to seeing you at a webinar soon. Bye now.